Good day, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Briareos and welcome to the review of Kuro no Kiseki 2 Crimson SiN, the latest installment in Falcom's Legend of Heroes series. Crimson SiN builds on the foundations laid by Kuro no Kiseki in 2021, refining and adding combat-related mechanics, reintroducing minigames and other features found in previous Trails games, and continuing the story of the Arkwright Solutions Office. Let's start with combat, which saw a few improvements here and there, but it's still basically the same, so I won't go too much into detail. Characters can now cast a single art during real-time combat, set by the Xyphas drive. Performing a perfect dodge allows to cross-counter with the nearest party member. Control switches to said character and the resulting attack will deal massive damage and most probably stun the target. Attacking a stunned enemy during shard battles, the name of turn-based combat, allows to perform an EX chain by staying close to a party member, spending a single boost bar and either performing a normal attack or a craft. The EX chain will trigger after that, with involved characters using a craft without spending CP. All enemies within the area of effect of the first attack will be damaged, stunned or not. This makes battles against normal enemies even faster than before, as you can stun a single enemy with real-time attacks, trigger shard battle to do damage to all engaged enemies, act before them and use special attacks to make a quick work of everyone. Getting CPs and boost bars back is incredibly easy in real-time combat, to the point that you'll barely use arts during standard battles, as it's much faster to simply abuse crafts to defeat many enemies at once. This is contrasted by bosses, which start as turn-based battles right away and play like you'd expect a Trails game would, and could even end up feeling a bit too protracted due to the boss's resilience compared to standard enemies. Normal enemies do become stronger, but the party does too, and in addition you get better and better quartzes for bigger bonuses, and the more you play, the less threatening standard enemies become. Boss difficulty ramps up nicely in most cases, there are a couple of bumps when enemies with sudden death attacks appear, and a cool deal away with multiple boss battles back to back with lengthy cutscenes before, in between and after. Oh, and some bosses can S-break at any difficulty level. Minigames are back. You won't get Kuro's version of Magical Girl Alisa, and now I realize I would pay good money to see Feli, Elaine and Shizune in Magical Girl outfits, but you do get an improved version of the Boundless Corridor, called Marchengarten. First introduced in Hajimari no Kiseki / Trails into Reverie, the Boundless Corridor was a series of dungeons you could tackle with all characters from the previous Trails games. The Marchengarten is not as extensive, featuring only characters found in the two Kuro games, but it's better structured and more interesting to go through thanks to more varied settings, like puzzle elements and progression being objective-based, rather than simply fighting everything you meet. Floors in the garden are composed by several maps, each with its reward, and multiple playthroughs are required to clear all maps on a floor. At the end of each floor an exclusive boss awaits Van and crew. Should you find yourself in need of help, Mirabel Alton from MTSC will offer some support in exchange for crystals found in the garden. In addition to items, equipment and experience, the garden is home to a plethora of costumes and BGMs from all over the Trails series. These are collected by playing a gacha game starring Mare, Van's digital assistant, then by exchanging game tokens to redeem what you want. Many minor characters have a more active role in Kuro 2. You will guide Mare through digital mazes to open chests and doors in a hacking minigame, and Cutter's flying robot Theo will have to evade laser traps to unlock otherwise inaccessible areas. Minigames also include fishing, a one-on-one basket showdown, and a new card game called Seventh Hearts. Fishing is a rather simple affair, while Seventh Hearts seem on par with what Cold Steel's offered before. I say seems because I'm quite bad at card games and spent only minimal time with it. You can still go watch movies with one of two partners, but there aren't as many flicks, or occasions to watch them, as in Kuro 1. Connect events are only available in 2 chapters, but are still great fun to go through. I particularly like one specific event between Elaine and Shizuna. A new mechanic is the Shard Search, triggered by archery. This is used throughout the game to collect Marchengarten crystals in the real world, and unfortunately is only used sparingly for story purposes. When you need to use a Shard Search, someone in the party tells you to, and the game clearly shows the area of interest where what you're searching for is. There are many tailing events, which never go overboard in difficulty or length. This leaves us with the story, and this is where Kuro 2 kinda drops the ball. Crimson SiN takes place a few months after the ending of Kuro 1, with Agnes still working part-time at the Arkwright Solutions office, but with the rest of the cast somewhere else, and many won't rejoin until the second chapter. Other characters will help Van instead, all of them previously introduced in Kuro 1, and of course there will be returning faces from previous Trails games, but don't expect to see many playable characters from Cold Steel. I actually like this choice, it makes Kuro no Kiseki's story and characters stand on their own without relying too much on cameos. The first 2 chapters also feature parallel storylines where you are forced to use certain party members. Another good thing, as you are gradually introduced to new story elements, you don't have a large party to manage, and you can get accustomed to how everyone fights. What I don't like is the main plot device used in Kuro 2. Now, there will be spoilers ahead. I will not detail how the story goes, as many of you still haven't played Reverie and the first Kuro, but I will discuss this plot device and why I dislike it. One more thing. This plot device is revealed during the prologue, around 2 hours into the game, and I saw people posting images of that around. Still, if you want to get into the game without knowing any of these, jump at the timestamp on screen, I'll give you some time to do so. Agnes is still searching for the last Genesis device, when a red Grendel and a red mare start wreaking havoc across Calvard. Van and Elaine track down those two at a military base and... Red Grendel kills Elaine. This was a massively interesting turn of events, but when Van dies as well, I realize these deaths will be meaningless. And so they were. Agnes reaches the scene when Van dies, and one Genesis device turns back time, allowing Van and Elaine to gather allies and repel the Red Grendel. I absolutely hate this whole thing of killing characters and resurrecting them, and Crimson SiN's story is based entirely around this concept. One or more party members reach a violent end, time turns back, the party retains memories of the event, and they solve all problems. There is no way to skip these deaths, you have to witness them, and in many instances the game locks you out of many locations, making story progress very linear, which in itself I don't mind as long as it's well executed, but I was annoyed by this time-jumping thing after the third dead end. As story progressed, I went from annoyed to indifferent, to being morbidly amused by the frequency of those events, to disappointed because what happens in the third chapter is an incredibly interesting setup that could have been its own game, but instead it's simply resolved by reaching a dead end and then following what the game wants. Character development continues to be top-notch during these segments, but I simply couldn't get invested with all the stakes removed. It doesn't help that the bad guys aren't as threatening as Armata in Kuro 1. In addition to the Red Grendel, there are 2 other main antagonists, and it's just too many. The story shifts focus between antagonists without giving them a proper time to develop. We don't know who the Red Grendel is, but then the second antagonist, who was introduced in Kuro 1, appears and you have to deal with him. Only that the story pretty much sets him up as the main bad guy for the next game, and so you move to the last antagonist, another masked man. This one is deeply involved in the events of Chapter 3, and his unmasking just happens without any hints. After his defeat, the attention finally goes back to the Red Grendel, in the last part of the epilogue. The reveal of who this Red Grendel is abrupt and without any hints. Again. You get a better explanation on how it was born, but just like the other bad guy and other reveals in previous Falcom games, I'm looking at you, Hajimari, simply happens in an unsatisfactory way. I will say that the final confrontation with the Red Grendel is awesome though, a well-executed mix of game and story elements to create an excellent final boss fight.
それに、なめんじゃねえ。裏切り者どもの拳なんざ届くかよ。
ルー家の教師ほどの圧はありません。何としても乗り越えるだけです。それでこそ皆様かと。
I think the story, even if I didn't like the main plot device, is better spread out for the game's duration, without too many dull moments and the main plot line started within the game closed but with enough foreshadowing for the next game, or games, who knows. Kuro 2 connects heavily to Hajimari/Reverie, so be sure to play that before starting the Kuro sub-series. One more thing I didn't like is how the LGC meter is used. In the previous game, siding with either low, grey or chaos would affect part of the story. In Kuro 2, it's just an item during the final dungeon. I would love to see Falcom experimenting more with this idea, like giving access to skills or equipment exclusive to each alignment, and maybe not allowing to max out all stats in one playthrough. Kuro no Kiseki 2 looks and feels like its predecessor. Menus, shortcuts, button layout and game structure will feel immediately familiar. From the start there is variable frame rate, speed multipliers for battles, and the UI can be scaled for better visibility, all options that were introduced to the first Kuro with patches. Unfortunately, this means the engine still shares frequent model and texture pop-ups, at least on a standard PS4, and this is something Falcom should totally fix. I know their strengths lie elsewhere, but there aren't that many new things in the game, from locations to outfits or animations. Some cutscenes, especially those with characters fighting, have been mock-upped and they look fantastic, so I surely wish Falcom would step up their technical game a bit. Kuro no Kiseki 2 Crimson SiN is a competent addition to the Legend of Heroes series. It builds on the strengths of its predecessor, with more secondary activities and extras to unlock, but overall it's inferior due to reliance on a questionable plot device and underdeveloped antagonists. And now the wait is on for Kuro no Kiseki 3, or the first game to be announced in the West. I hope you have enjoyed this review and you'll stick around for more. Briare Oskarensky, over and out.
ま、いいんじゃねえか。